Hey, Texas Study students, this is Coach Science, welcoming you back to another one of our video lessons. Today's video lesson, we'll be talking about Chapter 9.1 and the Law of April 6, 1830. Now, in the year 1828, the Mexican government sent General Mier y Terán to investigate conditions in Texas. He spent almost a year touring Texas and wrote a report of his findings. Here we see a picture of Mr. General Mier y Terán right here when he investigated Texas in the year 1828. And this was actually a copy of the diary that he kept in his findings. Now, with Mexico City being so far away from Texas, the Mexican government felt that they needed to investigate as to what was going on in the northern state of Texas y Coahuila. So they sent General Mier y Terán to check on and investigate what was going on in the northern state of Texas. Now, Mier y Terán reported the following findings. First thing he reported was that Anglo-American colonists outnumbered Mexican settlers by 10 to 1, meaning that for every 10 American Anglo colonists there was only one Mexican settler there living within them. The second thing that he finds was that the influence of the United States was growing in Texas. That means more and more people coming in from the United States were influencing the area of Texas. If you remember from the previous video lesson, it talked about how there was schools, newspapers, and things of that nature that had no longer teaching Mexican history and teaching Mexican things or Mexican language. They were teaching them things from the United States and not following the rules of the empresarios. The last thing that Mr. General Mier y Terán found was that Texas colonists ignored Mexico's laws against slavery and trading with the U.S. This was a big deal to them. They did not want Texans or Tejanos that were living there to essentially have slaves, one, because it was opposed in Mexico, and two, to trade with the United States because they were not getting anything out of it. Now, after his year-long travel, Mier y Terán concluded that Mexico must gain control of Texas before it throws the whole nation into a revolution, meaning that the Mexican government had to do something about it quickly and now, immediately. If not, the people that were living, the Anglo-Americans living in Texas, were essentially going to overthrow the Mexican government and take it over for themselves and try to join the United States. So, with that happening and with Mier y Terán's report, they essentially needed to be able to control the people of the northern state of Texas, and here was their solution. As a result of the report of the Mier y Terán, the Mexican government passed the law of April 6, 1830 in an effort to control colonists. This was their counter against what was happening with so many Anglo-Americans there, and they could not stop them or control as to what they're doing because of how north or how much separation there was between the capital of Mexico City and Texas. Now, the first thing that they did to control this area of Texas in the law of April 6, 1830, this law outlawed immigration from the United States to Texas. So, you can no longer be a U.S. citizen coming to Texas. That was now illegal. Much like nowadays, when people who are trying to come into the United States is illegal, this is what Mexico did to the people from the U.S. trying to come to Texas. It was now illegal for them to do that. Second, this law canceled all empresarial land grants that had not been fulfilled. Anglo colonization of Texas was now illegal. So if you remember, Stephen F. Austin was one of the very first empresarios of Texas, right? And here we see him talking to people who were hopefully coming to Texas, tried to come to Texas to colonize it. But in the second term, the second you could call it the second line of this law, right? The second conduct of this law was that they're going to cancel all the land grants for the empresarios, even if they had not been fulfilled or they were promised in the future. And Anglo colonization of Texas was now illegal. Now, however, right, the Mexican government says we still need to put people up there in Texas y Coahuila. So the Mexican government encouraged Mexico, interior people who live in Mexicans who live in the interior of Mexico, and Europeans, settlers, to move to Texas. They were trying to encourage them to come to Texas. People who live in the interiors of Mexico or people who live in Europe, trying to get them to come to Texas. So what they did is they would even provide land and money for these settlers. So they would give you land and money and say, hey, here's an opportunity for you to get more land than what you have here in the interior of Mexico. You're going to get it in northern Mexico. Plus, not only are you going to get land, we're giving you money to move out there and settle that area. So this was the second term in the law of April 6, 1830, to counter the fact that the Anglo-Americans were gaining so much power in that area. The third thing they did, or what this law did, was this law stated that slaves could no longer be brought into Mexico. Right? As you see here, the United States settlers, or the Anglo-Americans coming in from the United States, they did not care about that. They saw the opportunity to be able to come into Texas and provide a new way of living with all these farms, plantations, cotton, agriculture, produce, right? But they needed manpower, so they would bring lots and lots of slaves with them. But this third set of law from the law of April 6 of 1830 said that they could no longer be brought slaves into Mexico because, if you remember, slavery was illegal in Mexico. Now, what this did is this would hurt the Anglo-Texans' ability to develop what was the king here in South Texas and in the southern part of the United States, the cotton industry. Now, the fourth thing that the law of April 6, 1830 had was that it placed a customs duty on all goods brought into Texas from the United States. Now, if you remember from our vocabulary words, what the customs duty was that every time something comes into a nation, you have to pay a tax on it, okay? So what the Mexican government did was literally they said, okay, you're going to bring in supplies from the United States, that's perfectly fine. We're going to tax you every single time that you do that. And it was a heavy tax, guys. It wasn't just 25 cents for every something you brought. No, it was a heavy tax on supplies because they did not want the Anglo-Americans trading with the United States. They wanted the economy of Mexico to be strong and built over the supplies that they were trading with in Mexico. But many Anglo-Americans were able to get cheaper supplies and more things that they needed as soon as possible from the United States. Now, what this did is this would hurt the Anglo-Texan economy by forcing them to pay even up to double and triple for those U.S. supplies. Now, the tensions over the law continue to grow. Under the Mexican Constitution of 1824, the law's provisions should have been decided by the states, not the national government. If you remember from the vocabulary words, states' rights. But many Texans felt that the national government had gone too far, and instead of solving the law of April 6, 1830, it caused the tensions between Mexico and Texas to grow stronger. A lot of people from Anglo-American Texans felt that they had crossed the line, telling them what to do, because a lot of them believed in that states' rights power. So, because of that, the tensions between the northern state of Texas and the national government of Mexico continue to rise and continue to literally heat up as this law of April 6, 1830 was passed on to this northern state of Texas. Now, this concludes our video lesson on Chapter 9.1, the law of April 6, 1830. This is Coach Signs, signing out.